Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.
Hello again, everyone, and thanks for joining us for Saturday's edition of Alaska Weather. Up first here, we still have that flood warning for Taku Lake and River still going on today, but that's forecast to end at 10 p.m., just 4.5 more hours, and the end in sight there. And from there, just moving on. One more, I think. There we go. Satellite imagery showing this band of moisture been stationary there for really about the last day or two. It's a little bit farther to the west, middle of the week, and is now pushed eastward and brought some fair amounts of rain in across the Panhandle today, even though the heaviest clouds appear to be back toward Yakutat yet. Where it is raining there over to Cordova, heaviest rainfall amounts are more in toward the northern interior there, with Sitka picking up a little over an inch in the last 24 hours, and just under 1.5 inches falling in Juneau in the same time period there. So again, the heavier rain definitely got eastward there into Elfin Cove, all the way down to just some drizzle this afternoon at Port Alexander, and then sunshine and much warmer temperatures showing up down over the southern southeast coast, with Ketchikan up around 80 degrees this afternoon. Everywhere else well into the 70s. And back over the interior, kind of a partly to mostly cloudy day with a few isolated showers here over south central Alaska. Low pressure over in this area here back toward the Alaska Peninsula. That's southerly flow there on the east side of that system, streaming moisture northward, but mostly just clouds and areas of light rain through sprinkles in Kodiak, and some moisture up around Soldovia today, and possible showers here up the western inlet. But there were thunderstorms developing just over northeast Bristol Bay on up the Kuskokwim Valley there near the Nikolai McGrath areas, and forming here due to the afternoon heating, warming up enough to trigger those thunderstorms near 80 at Eagle here in the along the edge of this cloud band here, and then just off to the east, and even back on the sunny side of the on the back side of this system, a few isolated thunderstorms popping up there as well. You can see this band not really all that impressive as far as rainfall goes, just 1/100 of an inch occurring at Barrow, but a little bit heavier here from the central Brooks Range down into the Koyukuk Valley. Bell's picking up nearly 1/4 of an inch, and then trails back to the southwest. Weekends kind of getting pulled apart here with this batch of moisture continuing southward. And here's another band of moisture with a cold front there, just pressing on to the western Arctic coast this afternoon, with a little bit of rain possibly there around the Point Lay area, but just in advance of it, clearing out around Barrow. Sunshine today, and also over the North Slope as well. Otherwise, the Bering Sea had some clearing going on here. Again, that dry, warm air mass sliding out of Russia. Looks like that cleared the skies out all the way down to just about Yakutat. Mostly sunny in St. Paul today. Cloudy on Alaska. Then with this low pressure area over the Alaska Peninsula, moderate rain at times at Cold Bay, and they had about just under 0.8 of an inch, 0.78 to be exact there at Cold Bay in the last 24 hours. But not much rain going on this afternoon, just back to the west. And then on the northwest winds kicking up to about 40 miles an hour in gusts at Atka today, with 1.5 miles in fog. Much lighter winds back out to the west. So a pretty windy area here from say Unalaska out to Atka there. Those winds should slowly diminish this evening as that low begins to weaken, but won't end altogether. Rolling this through again, you can see as it goes on, kind of a disturbance here. So the cloud band continuing to narrow and become thinner, and eventually it'll gradually push off to the east, but still is going to remain in this area at least through tomorrow, and probably won't pull out altogether until late tomorrow night or early on Monday. But even then, there'll still be a few lingering showers up here over the northern southeast coast. And otherwise, you can see this front looks to be pretty much stationary there, with the upper ridge over northwest Canada holding it back to the west, but increasing west-northwest flow coming over another high here over the Russian Far East. That's going to eventually begin to shove some moisture southward and then eastward here starting, well, tonight with this system back through here. Pretty good batch of moisture right there is going to be bringing a good shot of rain into the Seward Peninsula late tonight and throughout the day tomorrow, possibly dropping to the south coast there of Norton Sound and into the interior tomorrow afternoon, or definitely by tomorrow night, and then that whole mess will be shifting eastward across the Tanana Valley. On the chart today, this afternoon, one front here, another one there. This one appears to be more active and has a little bit more moisture associated with it than this one did. And again, just the heating of the day, tripping off some thunderstorm activity here, again, northeast Bristol Bay, mostly up over the northeast interior, and to a lesser extent behind that front due to the sunshine breaking out there, and then all the rain from Valdez all the way over into the northern panhandle today. But the sunny hot stuff down over the southern areas, isolated showers, heavier rain along the Alaska Peninsula with that stationary low there. But again, it's pulling that drier air down on the west side there, right? Probably won't reach the eastern Aleutians, but it did reach the Pribilofs today. High pressure, lots of low clouds, areas of fog out to the west, and then the again, those gusty winds right through this area will kind of hold tonight, dropping off a little bit, and the low weakening somewhat, but still a chance of rain all the way from Unalaska right on up to Kodiak Island, and again up into the southern inlet. Some of this could push on up into the western Prince William Sound areas. Wouldn't be surprised if maybe a little light rain occurs tonight or this evening over at Whittier. And then this front, again, not much change here. The main rain area over the northern panhandle staying fair down to the south, and these lows is kind of rippling up to the north and picking up the rain a little bit as they slide into the eastern areas there. This front pushes to this position, the other one gone off into northwest Canada there, or the Northwest Territories. Another trough makes landfall later tonight, keeping the low clouds, fog, and IFR conditions going on the west side here. Better conditions out to the east there with a little more of an offshore component to the wind flow. Front trails back out to another low here over the Russian Far East, but look for some pretty steady rainfall to move across the Seward Peninsula tonight. Otherwise, just some isolated showers over the southwest interior with mostly cloudy skies. And out to the west, nothing but high pressure out here over the western Bering and the Aleutians, and then that noses in, or actually to another center here, ridges in to the southwest coast. And tomorrow, again, mostly cloudy skies, showers here from Bristol Bay up across the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta areas, and in across the valley, Kuskokwim Valley, right up into the interior. Isolated thunderstorms possible again, mainly in the afternoon hours. Could be mostly sunny here over the eastern interior areas. Again, allowing temperatures to rise well into the 70s. And this narrowing band, frontal band here, still bringing some rain into the northern southeast coast, and that may slip down, maybe increase the clouds a little bit there, Prince of Wales Island, but otherwise, day much like today over the southern southeast coast, probably up to Wrangell, Petersburg, looking really good, just variable cloudiness there, and warmer temperatures. Still have this chance of rain here from the southern Kenai Peninsula area due to the south to north flow, continuing both at the surface and with the upper trough right through this area. So both of those factors keeping that rain chance a little elevated here over the Kenai Peninsula. Just some scattered showers, partial clearing. Could be probably a mostly dry day for much of Cook Inlet into the Matanuska-Susitna Valley areas, and hit and miss showers over the Copper River Basin. Thunderstorms, White Mountains, Alaska Range, and that's about it. Maybe out in advance of that system, but definitely band of rain, possibly heavy at times here across the Seward Peninsula and working inland a little bit there. But breaking out the showers behind that, kind of a look for definitely more clouds and a chance of rain here for St. Lawrence Island from the sunny skies you had today there. And again, this front down in this area, keeping it kind of damp there over the Alaska Peninsula with areas of fog for the Bering Sea. And then for forecast for Monday, nothing but high pressure out here over the Bering Sea. And the flow over the top of that is going to carry this front right into the Tanana Valley there. So look for rain, possibly heavy at times or moderate at times at any rate, from about the Fairbanks area in the afternoon back to the west to the Seward Peninsula. And then that'll begin to diminish, become a little less heavy and a little less continuous into the afternoon. A few showers to the northwest. Look for skies to clear out over the north slope and back in toward the Noatak Valley. But due to high pressure just off the coast, that's probably going to keep some areas of low clouds and fog in on the west side again. And another trough might bring a sprinkle or two with some clouds to the Barrow area, but definitely looks wet on the east side there from Arctic Village right up to Kaktovik and Barter Island. Isolated chance of a thunderstorm during the afternoon hours over the Alaska Range, Denali Park area, but looking pretty good here. Copper River Basin, say from Northway, possibly even Eagle, all the way down into Prince William Sound, North Gulf Coast, mostly sunny skies. There is a chance some of this rainfall could slide into the Susitna Valley, mostly north of Trapper Creek and Talkeeton in the afternoon. Definitely you'll be into the rain as you get up towards Denali Park and into the Tanana Valley. And then still some lingering showers here, mainly during the morning hours, but that front now completely washed out, remnants of the moisture in northwest Canada, but still a chance of showers, but definitely drier there for the northern southeast coast, and another sunny day for areas to the south. And then the Alaska Peninsula, kind of some leftover moisture there, and even more on the way as that southeast flow begins to push up to the north, probably getting a little more steadier, continuous rainfall on Tuesday. For temperatures today, quite a contrast here, mid-50s over the northern panhandle to near 80 down to the south, mid-50s North Gulf Coast, 60s inland, Tanana Valley, lower 70s to 80 there at Eagle, 72 Fort Yukon, and then a couple of 70s showing up here at Galena and Huslia, 40s there on the Arctic coast, just 38 at Kaktovik, but Etusuk up to 60. 50s to lower 60s over the northwest, and 60s, lower 60s for the deltas, 50s for the Pribilofs, up to 56. Actually, Unalaska is up to around 60 this afternoon, and 50s for the peninsula and 40s out west. For lows tonight, mid-50s, kind of mild up through this area, 30s on the Arctic coast to near freezing again around Barrow, Wainwright. Otherwise, lower 50s or upper 40s here to the south, 50s for all of the panhandle. Highs tomorrow, 70s to near 80 from the eastern border back to near 70 down to the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta. Cooler to the north, mostly in the 60s to the south, and then 70s again over the southern panhandle. Flying weather, marginal VFR here, continuing. IFR now mostly off the coast here, so just some marginal VFR from the central panhandle back to about Cordova or to the east. Kodiak Island, IFR, southern side of the Kenai Peninsula, and with that front moisture moving in, definitely IFR along the southern coast of the Seward Peninsula into Norton Sound, pushing inland, central western Arctic coast. Passes, get out of the way, marginal VFR, possibly becoming IFR in the southern approach of Anatuvik. Probably not so bad over toward Adigan, Lake Clark and Merrill, VFR, but rainy, VFR also, VFR for windy, Isabel. I believe everywhere else is VFR except for Chilkoot and White, which I need to catch up to. Oh yes, Portage, marginal VFR, possible IFR on the eastern entrance, and Chilkoot and White, marginal. Freezing levels, here's the colder air coming down behind those frontal systems as they push into the and across the northern slope areas. And 68,000 feet here over the interior. Still south to north flow here, keeping that frontal boundary stationary along the panhandle. With that, some icing possibilities. Below 13,000 feet here up over the north central interior back to the delta, and maybe some here over the Alaska Peninsula. Wind flow chart still has that 90-knot jet there coming right up toward the eastern Gulf Coast. And then here's the stuff coming in from the northwest, and then the upper low kind of stationary southwest of Kodiak. 9,000 feet up to 40 knots here over the interior, so pretty brisk in that area. Easterlies down to the south, 3,000 feet showing 10 to 20 knots now. Not all that strong there for the southeast coast, much lighter, more variable in over southern Alaska, and a little brisk there, 25 to 30 knot southwesterlies turning west-northwest at about 30 knots there into the northwest coast. Tomorrow afternoon, big high pressure area covering the northern and western Bering Sea with this low, pretty stationary and some brisk winds with that. For the turbulence threats, again, moderate chop possible here, pushing into the interior all the way back to central and eastern Arctic coast, maybe some isolated moderate there for the eastern Aleutians and Alaska Peninsula. And after the break, I'll be back with a look at the marine forecasts.
Obstacles are a fact of life and of aviation. Obstacles can pop up at the most inconvenient and downright dangerous times. Towers, mountains, trees, all kinds of adversity. Anything in the vicinity of the end of a runway that sticks up above the airport elevation is a potential obstruction. Of most concern are trees growing in the line of a runway's approach or departure path. Obstacle clearance was cited as the cause of 2.5% of all takeoff accidents. That may not sound like much, but consider the relatively small number of takeoffs performed at airports with obstructions and the relatively small number of such airports. Compare those figures to the many more airports with adequate safety zones and the numbers of operations performed there. Obstructed takeoffs are riskier. Obstructed takeoffs require short field procedures. Use all the runway for takeoff. Rotate at the recommended speed for short field and climb at the best angle of climb speed, VX. VX will result in a higher deck angle, and that can be unnerving if you're not used to it. Maintain VX until clear of the obstacle, then transition to best rate of climb, VY, or cruise climb speed for better cooling and better visibility over the nose. The POH can give you the numbers for the distance to land over the mythical 50-foot obstacle. To give yourself a margin of safety when calculating your total landing distance, add 50% to the landing distance over a 50-foot obstacle from the POH. Earlier, we talked about developing personal performance figures for the POH. Do it for obstructed takeoffs and landings, too. To determine landing distance, come over the runway threshold at the proper airspeed and 50 feet AGL, above ground level. See how far down the runway you touch down. Speed control is critical. Too fast and you may not have enough runway to stop. Too slow and you may not make it to the runway. Fortunately, few pilots are banging into things on the way into airports. Obstructions don't show up as a category of landing accidents. But inasmuch as runway length is an accident category, we have to ask if the need to get over some obstacles on approach caused some of the pilots of accident airplanes to run out of runway. Look at that windsock. It's pointing almost straight across the runway. Strong crosswinds are a difficult weather condition. We know they make good landings a challenge, but they complicate takeoffs too. Wind conditions are the third leading cause of takeoff accidents. Just as you do during approach, you've got to compensate for the wind during takeoff, roll, and climb. Practice on the way to the runway by keeping control surfaces properly oriented to the wind while taxiing. Remember, elevator neutral and aileron into direct crosswinds. Climb into quartering headwinds and dive away from them. This will minimize the chance of upset and help you think about the wind direction and get you ready to counter it on takeoff. As you begin the takeoff roll, the aileron should be deflected full into the wind. Their effectiveness increases with speed, so decrease aileron deflection as the airplane accelerates. At liftoff, one wing will be low, and opposite rudder pressure will be maintaining the forward flight path. Essentially, you'll be in a slip. Transition into a crab for the climb. Point the nose into the wind at the angle that will keep your track aligned with the runway. Strong winds are often gusty winds, and that calls for additional considerations. Just as you add extra knots on approach, do the same on takeoff in gusty conditions. Keep the aircraft on the ground longer to get more speed before rotation. Some pilots use a little less nose-up trim to help keep it on the ground, and a little more back pressure for rotation. Once off the runway, climb briskly to put some distance between you and the ground. And maintain an adequate airspeed in the climb to account for the gusts as you do on approach. You know, one of the most common landing mistakes in general aviation, the gear-up landing. Gear-up landings usually occur because pilots are distracted from their normal routine. That's why checklist discipline is essential in preventing these incidents. This pilot knew he had a problem with the gear. That's why he's landing on the grass. The first concern is the safety of all those on board, and these two walked away unharmed. The good news? Gear up landings rarely cause any injuries besides damage to the pilot's ego. But you owe your airplane better treatment than that, don't you think? Remember, gear down in advance, gump on final, always. This is it, the one that makes the palms sweat, the crosswind landing. But first, a word of advice. You can't make a good crosswind landing if you don't survive the turn to final. Be sure to account for the wind in the pattern. If it blows you past the approach path, there's a tendency to try to make a steep turn to get back on final. Many pilots have lost it in cross-control stall mishaps. As in all landings, first consider the factors you'd account for in a totally benign situation. Landing point, runway surface, target speeds, then add in the X factor or factors. In this case, the crosswind. Once on final, are you going to crab or slip to keep the flight path aligned with the runway? This question has been fodder for endless pilot lounge discussion, and the answer is essentially a matter of preference. Some pilots are uncomfortable with the cross controls needed for side slips and so prefer the crab. The crab simply requires pointing the nose of the plane toward the wind to account for drift and keep the flight path aligned with the runway. However, the pilot is going to have to make the transition from the crab to the slip before landing to get the nose of the plane pointed down the runway. If you land in the crab, the plane may go off the side of the runway during the landing roll, or landing gear tires may peel off their wheels. Those who prefer to slip all the way down final say they like having time getting a feel for the controls in the slip, instead of transitioning from a crab in the last seconds of flight. The descent rate will be a little greater in a slip, but not by much. Some POHs advise against slipping the aircraft with full flaps or when fuel falls below a certain level, because lateral inertial forces may move fuel away from the fuel lines to the engine, resulting in power loss. Whether you crab or slip, you'll have to adjust control inputs to account for the changes in wind speed and direction as you descend. If conditions are gusty, add half the difference between the wind speed and peak gusts to your usual approach speed. Don't try to finesse the approach in a gusty crosswind. This is nasty stuff. The airplane will probably be bucking and bouncing around the approach path. That's okay, just ride it down. This is not the time for a full stall landing, but you should still land on the mains with the nose wheel slightly higher. What about flaps? You hear lots of discussion among pilots about whether to use full flaps in gusty crosswinds. The argument against full flaps is that it just provides more surface area the gusts and crosswinds can push against, and the lower approach speed associated with full flaps may not be sufficient to maintain crosswind control. The argument for full flaps? Well, full flaps will lower your stall speed. It also gives you a better view of the runway because it pitches the nose down. The POH will be your guide for flap use in various conditions. When wind conditions permit, the Air Safety Foundation recommends using full flaps for landings. If you think the crosswind is too strong for full flaps, give some thought to finding a runway more aligned with the wind. If you have to land with a strong crosswind, you should use the minimum flap for runway length.
Well, no heavy or significant winds expected anywhere here across the southeast coast over the next several days. Kind of variable to west-southwest up to 10 knots, maybe 20 knots there right at the Lynn Canal area, Eldred Rock. Northwest 15 here for the north coast, otherwise kind of variable to south at 10, so very light wind conditions both tomorrow and Monday here. A little more westerly on the central coast or variable to west, but all in the 10 to 15 knot range and not much change at all over the inside waters. For Prince William Sound, southwest at 15 tomorrow, otherwise pretty light for the North Gulf Coast. 15 knot winds across the Kodiak Island marine zones on up to possibly 25 knots in the afternoon there, blowing out a tourniquet arm for the northern inlet and maybe 20 knots there in the central areas. Then for Monday, more of a southwest wind, probably not as high as 25 knots here. I'd say at this point in time, more of the 10 to 15 knot range, like we have down here for the Barren Islands west at 15 and southwest to westerlies, kind of indicating high pressure here over the northeast Pacific. And then for Bristol Bay, southeast at 10, Same thing southwest of Kodiak Island. Small craft advisory, still pretty good possibility there for the marine area south of the peninsula, and even up to 20 knots or 22 knots there for the Bering Sea side. Then those fall back to just light variable conditions there for Bristol Bay on Monday. Southeast 10 and then lighter but still southeast winds, only at 15 knots blowing across the peninsula. For the Aleutians, light variable conditions here west of Adak over to about Shimia, where it becomes south of 15. Northerlies coming down to 15 knots for the Atka area tomorrow, and still a possibility of some small craft advisories there in the southern zone of the Fox Islands. And then on Monday, east to northeast at about 10 here for the central and western areas, 15 to possibly as high as 20 knots. Then up along the southwest coast, light variable winds to westerly north of Nunivak Island, southwest at 15 for St. Lawrence Island, back into the northern Bering Sea, and kind of variable but light wind there for the Pribilofs. For Monday, look for small craft advisories here for St. Lawrence Island, up to 25 knots there, and 20 knot winds back into the northern Bering Sea around St. Matthew Island, and south to southwest 10 to 15 along the coast, southeast for the Pribilofs. And possibility 25 knot winds, a possibility for a short period of time tomorrow, dropping back to westerly here for the western coast, and 20 knot winds tonight for these western areas. Come down to 15 tomorrow, southwest 10, or tomorrow afternoon, southwest 10 for the east side, light and variable. For Monday, lighter winds just about all areas. And tonight, here's the first front pushing in, or actually the second, and then another band behind that. Rain sliding into the Seward Peninsula, which tomorrow will slowly edge its way eastward and southward. Still kind of damp for the North Gulf Coast, Kodiak Island area, and diminishing wind there with that front along the, or diminishing rain with that front in this area. And it's gone on Monday, and the front in the interior with more rain. Have a nice evening.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.